Welcome back to a special live edition of Watching Film with Seth Varnadore. I am joined by the college sports editor of DraftKings Nation, Collin Sherwin. Collin, how are you doing tonight?
Seth, buddy, big day for both your alma maters.
That's right.
USF just let go their defensive coordinator, Glenn Spencer, and the Gators, after firing their defensive coordinator earlier this season, have now let go Dan Mullen. So, I think the entire state of Florida has underperformed this year. And so the entire state of Florida is just sort of healing myself. Yeah. And I think it's going to be really interesting. Momentum's going to be a big, big thing coming out of this. Who lands the biggest name is going to have a lot going forward in the recruiting cycles, it looks like.
Yeah, and I have a theory for another day about why Florida football has gone so far down the tubes, and it has to do with payment of high school coaches. But that's a different topic for another day. Yeah, where do they pay them the best? Georgia and Alabama,
right?
Texas, But that's a topic for another day. Today we want to talk about the opening at Florida now that Dan Mullen has been fired. Unceremoniously in some it's we're cheering in some places earlier today in his office by other sources. But Collin, first I want to get your perspective as somebody who's not really in the Florida bubble, someone kind of on the outside. What do you think about this job and where it's at, especially with kind of the seemingly insane amount of pressure that's put on coaches here? This will be the fourth coach in the last 8 years fourth coach in the last 10 years, I believe.
Yeah, I think they made one good hire, one questionable hire, and one just bad hire in that time. And so, Mullen, I thought, was a good hire. I thought this was the right guy to bring in. I thought him and Strickland would get along. It seems like in that press conference today, it looked like him and Strickland were maybe not simpatico on this.
There seemed to be more than on the field stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And, the weird celebration after beating an FCS team who hung 50-something on you. I mean, I was like, from a national perspective, and I say this, you say I'm outside the Florida bubble, sir. I'll have you know, I watch many a Gator game at the over here at the patio on McDill here in South Tampa with the Tampa Gator Club. I would say that this is perceived nationally as what should be a top 10 job. But is it a top 5 job anymore? And I'm not sure about that. The facilities upgrades have definitely added. And it seems like there's more money there than ever. The fact that you can just sort of throw $12 million here at Mullen and not really have to worry about it too much. It's kind of a nice place to be. Getting the indoor practice facility done, which I believe was completed under Mullen, was it not?
I think McElwain. It was completed under McElwain, or the project started under McElwain, maybe been completed under Mullen, but
yeah, it definitely
it's been about 4 or 5 years now, so they haven't had it a long time,
right? And, but the fact that it took them, took them that long to get one,
and they're going to open the football only facility next year, I believe, which was kind of I think one of Mullen's big projects when he came in, and has been Strickland's big project to date.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's amazing that UF let it get that bad from a facilities perspective. Like, almost mind blowing. You know what I mean? That a flagship institution that's got all the resources and support of UF and all the national championships just sort of fell that far behind the rest of the SEC. They fell behind Clemson.
It certainly seemed like, at least I think under Foley, it kind of got to the point where, Spurrier won without a lot of stuff.
Right.
And then they gave a little bit to Urban and he won with a little. So they're like, well, you don't need more. You're winning. I don't think they had the foresight to see what was coming down with the kind of arms race in terms of facilities. And they're late to the party. But I think that was something in the state of Florida kind of all around. They're all late to the party on facilities. So I think they thought the talent base they had was just going to stay forever and people were going to dip into it. And, that's obviously caused all these teams to kind of fall behind.
South Florida for sure. Miami, absolutely. They just got the Hector done. Like USF still doesn't have an indoor facility. They put a shovel in the ground, but they don't have one yet. I mean, to think that you're going to be able to practice outside in modern college football in Florida, you crazy? So to see where it gets there. My most interesting question, I think, is if you are targeted coach from both LSU and UF, what's the better job? You know what I mean? That is really, really an interesting question. It seems from the outside perspective that LSU certainly has more fiefdoms and more chiefs, and definitely is a bit more of a political gig than UF is. For the most part, you can say whatever you want about Jeremy Foley and scheduling soft and whatever else you want to bash him for, but he protected his coaches and the accountability started with him. And so I think maybe some of the political side of the job that happens at a lot of bigger places. Look, you need to be a glad hand, shaking hands, kissing babies if you're taking the job at Texas, at USC, because everybody thinks they're the most important donor in those programs. I think at UF that is slightly downturned a little bit, and that's really good. There's, of course, bull Gators who expect to be glad-handed and have birthday cards sent. I get that. But, it seems like it's less of a political job for the person who gets it. The downside of that is I think people expect the recruiting to be on a par with Georgia, on a par with the number, they want top 3, top 5 recruiting classes. And the way that the state of Florida is getting picked over now by so many different schools, that's just going to be more of a challenge. And so something I was talking about with a couple of people earlier today is this the point in the development of the program where, of course, you need to put up a fence around everything in Florida that you can, particularly in South Florida. You need to be able to get kids out of there. But is this where the program needs to start looking at North Carolina, Virginia, maybe some Texas kids, some North Texas kids, some kids in those areas?
When they were at their best, they pulled selectively. Percy Harvin's a Virginia kid.
Yeah.
David Nelson was a guy they signed from Texas. When they were at their best, they got what they wanted in Florida and then went out and got from other places too. I think one thing that Strickland said today in his press conference about kind of the firing of Mullen and going forward is he pitched alignment within the program, alignment within the university, and with the booster club. And I think that was kind of his pitch to your point of we're not LSU, we're not Auburn, we're not going to have the boosters try to do a hostile takeover.
Right.
He said there's a lot of alignment. And then last week it was curious because a lot of people thought this hinted at wanting to retain Mullen. They put a piece out last week, I think through the college, the athletics website, about a donor. And he said that donors don't run the Florida athletics department. And he's one of their key donors. And that's something they put out. So everyone initially thought that was, that means they're not going to fire Mullen just because the fans want to. Now it looks like more like a pitch to potential coaches. Hey, the donors don't run the program. We are having a line view here. So
right.
Kind of interesting.
And I think that's hugely important because I think there are so many schools that just can't get out of their own way. I went to Texas for the Super Regional. USF played in the Super Regional in baseball this year, and I went to Texas for a weekend and just saw the facilities, talked to a few people. There are so many disparate entities that you have to deal with in that job, whether it's media, whether it's internal, whether it's local donors, whether it's guys like forget his name who own Red McCombs, guys like that, guys who have just donated so much money that
high school
they have this
coaches. It's like a high school football coaches association. There's so much there.
Yeah, there's so many fiefdoms that you have to protect, and so that makes the job so much more difficult. I think in Florida, they've done a really good job of not allowing that to happen. Now, because of what's happening with the women's basketball coach and that investigation, and Strickland seeming and today in this press conference just looking like he was totally not prepared for that question. How are you not prepared for that question? I don't understand.
Yeah. My bigger question is, how are you going to get fired for the Florida athletic director for a bad women's basketball coach?
Well, it's not just the women's basketball coach. But you got to handle it.
Yeah.
You got to handle it.
It'd be one thing I think you fire the guy regardless, but with the allegations coming out, but if it's Gino Auriemma, maybe you give him a chance. If it's a guy that can't even make the tournament, what are you doing? What are you waiting for?
Yeah,
don't get fired for a bad women's basketball coach. That's my advice to any potential athletic director out there.
Yeah, that's the realities of the job. There's 2 sports in Florida. There's football and spring practice, and you can't worry about the Gators should be immensely proud of all the programs that they have that compete nationally and for national championships every year. And it is one of the premier, if not the premier public athletics department in the country. overall. But yeah, don't get caught out like that. And so just for him to look completely unprepared for that question, that was kind of weird. And Strickland seems like a very prepared guy normally, so that was a surprise.
I don't think he's a dummy. I'm interested if there's some type of legal.
Sure,
I'm sure there's some type of legal things that kind of limit his ability to answer some of these questions, but he's not handled this very well at all from the beginning. But he did say today, he was asked, "Are you going to be making the hire based on all this stuff?" And he said, "Yes, I am the one that's making this hire." So let's talk about
Jeremy Foley. That's some Jeremy Foley stuff right there. Jeremy Foley
who is still around the program. I believe I've heard he still has an office in the building, so he's never too far. And from all I've heard from people is he hated Dan Mullen. So Mullen would not have been a Jeremy Foley hire. So good or bad. But now we're looking for the next guy. So I'm going to go through some names and we can talk about it. Then I'll ask you if you got anybody. A name that I think, right, you mentioned wanting to recruit and win some recruiting battles in South Florida. The first guy I'm going to bring up you think is tailor-made for that. Mario Cristobal, killing it at Oregon in terms of recruiting. Since he was hired, I believe, or he got elevated the same year Florida hired Mullen. His average recruiting class at Oregon is 9th in the country, which you have to go out of state for a lot of those guys, pretty much all of them. So, and then he was originally a player at Miami under Jimmy Johnson, head coach at FIU, coach for Schiano at Rutgers, also coached offensive line tight end at Miami before, but he is a Miami guy. If you could get him in the fold, I think if you're looking for a guy that can recruit, he'd be the guy. From what I've heard, he's the guy that every single meeting they talk recruiting. He'll pull out your call logs in the middle of a meeting, kind of call you on the carpet if you're not making the calls to recruits. So he kind of lives and breathes recruiting. He's got the Saban dust on him a little bit too, so that never hurts. But what do you think about Cristobal? I think it would be tough to get him away from all that money at Oregon and kind of what they can offer. And, maybe he doesn't want to come back to the SEC. And quite frankly, maybe he just hates Florida because he's a Miami guy.
So a few things here. I attended a Miami, North Carolina basketball game, and this had to be like 7-8 years ago. And I sat behind LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, who were sitting courtside. Really cool. Like, had a friend hook me up with some great seats, and it was like on campus at UM. And at halftime, they introduced the new coaches for the University of Miami football staff, and one of them was Mario Cristobal. Because remember, he took the job, and then he dumped Miami not very long after to go to Alabama. So everybody forgets that part of like the story of Mario and Miami. And I don't think there would be any hard feelings there. It seems like the Canes are very much in the mix for him. If I'm Mario, for me personally, that's a better job. Miami's a better job for him because if he comes to Florida and he can't quite get it going, it's going to take some of the shine off of him.
You don't get that Scott Frost extension.
You don't get that
Jim Harbaugh extension.
Exactly. But if you can't quite make it work at your alma mater, which is playing 45 minutes away from campus that has been through multiple cycles of just failure the last 15 years, that hasn't really been able to capture whatever it is, that job is a better job because 1, you're closer to home. 2, you can recruit kids in that 305 area and keep them home. And 3, if it doesn't work out, you're still going to be able to land on your feet somewhere. You know,
can they make my question would be, and I think it may end up being that Oregon would be the one that would be the top of the list. Can Miami make the financial commitment required for what he needs?
So if you're listening to the Le Batard program, Dan Le Batard's podcast, their producer, Mike Ryan, is apparently very plugged in to what's going on at Miami. And they're saying, and he's saying, and this is the thing that's being publicly said at Miami right now, which is that Miami is willing to way go over the top and do whatever it takes. And the number that got thrown around was $20 million, that the university was willing to invest $20 million additionally into what they're already putting in to do whatever it takes to get the football program right. And Julio Frank, the new he's not the new president, but he's been there a while now. But the president who has traditionally been seen as not caring as much about athletics, kind of got called out by Kirk Herbstreit on College Game Day, and that sort of like started this process in Miami. And we're all assuming, by the way, that Manny Diaz is fired. That is not official yet. I mean, it's probably
that's the other part of it. They don't have an athletic director. The coach is still there.
Right.
But I imagine there's already some back. If they want to do this, there's been some back channeling already. There's nobody cares about tampering or anything of that nature.
Mario is going to be able to handpick his boss, or at least have input onto who that boss would be if he's going to take this job. Like, I mean, that's just the reality on the ground. So, very interested to see who Miami hires as an AD. I think that AD hire will be very indicative of who they'll be able to get as a coach. But if I'm Mario, the better job is Miami, especially if you can plug in who your boss
for
is.
him. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that's the better job. And if they're willing to open up the bank, even if you got to take $1 million less to be in Miami, you know, you're going to land on your feet with a better deal if it doesn't quite work out. Whereas if you go to UF and you strike out, you're going to have to pull the Lane Kiffin and go back down to the bottom and work your way back up again.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I think the easier job, especially with Georgia looming, I think Miami's the easier job as well. But if you want to get back in the SEC, this is about as close to home as you could get. He fits kind of what they're looking for, I think, in terms of recruiting. His on-field record is not too dissimilar to Dan Mullen's in the same kind of time period. They're not crazy different. So that would give you some pause, but he won a ton at FIU and you're seeing what, I don't know how much different it was then, but you're seeing what Butcher Davis is saying now about FIU and the commitment to the program. He won a lot of games there, recruited really well, got guys like T.Y. Hilton to play there, that kind of thing. So I think he would be, he's definitely a guy you're hearing for the Miami vacancy. There is another guy that you're hearing name thrown around with Miami a lot, and you probably heard it on the same program. And this is a guy I've heard is probably not going to be the guy at Florida, from some indications I've seen, but he's a name that I think a lot of Florida fans would be excited by, Lane Kiffin. What do you think about him? How do you think it would work? He's kind of done the whole image rebuilding thing. What would he look like at Florida, you think?
So Scott Strickland, former Mississippi State AD, hiring Mississippi State's coach, and then going in and hiring Ole Miss's coach would be really interesting. I know that Lane's family lives like right over here, down here in Tampa. So getting closer to his kids, I think, would be something that might be a priority for him. He might want this job, just for that, so he can be a 2-hour drive from
his father-in-law is John Reeves, right? Or former father-in-law.
His former father-in-law is John. He was married to Layla, who is John's daughter. And I believe, So there's family reasons for him to be here. I think honestly, like, no offense to my Gator fan friends that are on here, it's not like Gainesville is like some sprawling metropolis with like tons of blue martinis and places to go drink, but like it's better than Oxford, you know what I mean? And it's probably a better place to live and like be, and day to day. He's already got a home in Boca. He said he didn't sell his house. For Lane, it probably makes sense. Does it make sense for UF? Lane brings offense. Lane sells tickets. Lane's really good on social media. He recruits. Like, this guy can win, man. And I think it would make a lot of sense. But again, it's Lane Kiffin, Joey Freshwater. You're gonna need some kind of morals clause or something like that, where you can get out of a big contract or whatever might happen.
Yeah.
He's certainly grown. Yeah, he's certainly grown up, but still, he's a single guy. You know what I mean? Yes. Like things are going to happen. There are things that have happened even when he was at Oxford that have been whispered about and whatever. And we don't want to implicate, but you take some off the field chances there's some things that could happen off the field with Lane Kiffin, but man, look what he did with Matt Corral. Nobody thought that kid was going to be this, and now
Matt Corral, who famously, somewhat infamously now, Dan Mullen chose Emory Jones over Matt Corral. Matt Corral was committed to McElwain. I think would have kept his commitment, but Mullen decided to go with Emory Jones, who he had some more comfort with because he kind of recruited him. Corral was a California kid, so he wasn't really on Mississippi State's radar. So the other kind of with Kiffin, I think if you look at his recruiting now at Ole Miss, it may not wow you. You go back and look at what he did at USC when he first got there. I think he signed back-to-back top 3 classes, and then the 8th class, even with the kind of probation stuff going on. So the guy can recruit. He's done it before at a high level. Would he be able to do it at Florida? I think so. I just don't know if he's getting the chance. From what I've heard, and I'm not super connected, but I know some people, they think Kiffin's the no-go, and it may be for the reasons you kind of mentioned. But I think he would be an interesting candidate.
Yeah, and you know what? You can hire a search firm to run a background. You know, we've seen how many times if search firms just sort of mailed in the background check, and then all of a sudden you find out all this stuff later about a guy. So it happens.
You find out all this stuff after you fire the guy.
Right, exactly, and you're still paying him. So that's probably not a great thing. But yeah, I mean, if I'm UF, I strongly consider rolling the dice because I mean, if you want to win, that guy's going to win. He's going to score points. He's going to sell tickets. He's going to make you nationally relevant immediately. And right now, like Florida State, Florida next week is on ESPN
Cartoon
Network. What is it?
Cartoon Network.
It's on Cartoon Network. Yes, it's on Cartoon Network at noon, and you have to enter a password to watch it. So, that's probably not where that game needs to be, and that would not happen if Lane Kiffin is your coach.
No, and I like you said, I think he brings some excitement. I know a lot of people have compared him with kind of more of the modern Spurrier, which I'm sure a lot of Florida fans wouldn't mind going back to those days. Next name I'm going to mention seems to be one that is more likely. From everything you hear, this is a guy that would accept. He's been pretty picky in the past few years, but this is a guy who would accept if offered. Seems to be a rising star. Billy Napier at Louisiana was one time Clemson offensive coordinator. Didn't work out well. I wonder, to me, a guy that kind of failed early in his career and has had to similar to Kiffin, a guy that failed early in his career and had to kind of remake himself and come back up, and he's still kind of this. He's only 42 years old, so it's not. But I think he got the Clemson offensive coordinator job when he was 28, youngest coordinator ever at Clemson. Wow. I think he was right before Chad Morris. They did all right, but they didn't quite make the next step. Then Morris, and then you saw him go to Scott and the running, I forget his name now, but you saw them go to those guys, Tony Elliott. And then and kind of take off. But he's a guy that worked for Dabo, worked for Saban. Some people say he's kind of a mix of the two. Supposed to be a really good recruiter. What do you know? And what do you think about Billy Napier? Supposedly turned down Auburn and South Carolina last year. Been kind of waiting. Turned down Mississippi State before. Has kind of been waiting for the right opportunity. What do you think about him? Tell me your thoughts, and I'll give you some kind of thoughts on what I've read and what Scott Strickland said today.
So the thing with Napier is that you get a lot of points in this business for not jumping when you first get the opportunity to jump. You know what I mean? Like, he put together a winning team in a tough place to win, and it's in a conference that is loaded now. I mean, Sun Belt's a tough conference to win now, and he's consistently won there. They'll play for the Sun Belt Championship again this year. So the fact that he didn't jump when he first got the opportunity and has continued to maintain success and seems to have it building on itself, and famously gave this speech to the basketball arena saying he was coming back at the middle of the basketball game and all this kind of stuff. I mean, he's definitely got a lot of credit for that. As a recruiter, there's a whole world of difference between recruiting to Lafayette and recruiting to Gainesville. And I don't know how it translates, but certainly his Clemson experience will, And
I believe he was recruiting coordinator at Alabama at one point when he was the receivers coach there. So he's not been the head man recruiting, but he's been on that level, has been described. I think I read that even Saban described him as a relentless recruiter, which is kind of, I think Florida fans just want to see somebody trying a little more. It seems
Florida high school coaches want to see somebody trying a little bit more for sure. I think that's interesting. If he's that kind of recruiter, and you can get people to coach, you're going to have a budget at UF where you can hire a couple coordinators who can really coach them. If you're the head guy and you can get out there in the streets and really pound the pavement, bring them back to campus, get them on, get a good OC, get a good DC, put together a good staff, which you'll be able to do. That could be a really good fit. He does, and the fact that he has experience in SEC programs, not Clemson. And when he was at Clemson, let's face it, Clemson wasn't recruiting like they do now. But I remember
I think they were just starting when he got there. He did some recruiting stuff for them too, and they just started to kind of make that ascent. And now they're at a whole different level.
I remember there was a bowl game where he was the OC, and USF beat them in Charlotte.
and just whipped them and looked pretty good doing it. And I think that was part of the as I recall, I think that was part of the fallout from part of them do. So I think that it's a good job. You know what I mean? And he's a guy. If you're not going to take South Carolina, Florida's a better job. If you're not going to take, Mississippi State or someplace like that, Florida's a better job. If you're holding out for a job, what are you holding out for that's not this? Texas?
That's from Florida? All indications you've seen is that he would take it if offered. This is he's been waiting for a job at this level. He's also a candidate in some eyes at LSU. So
that was my first thought when LSU came open. I thought he'd be a fit.
So what Strickland stressed today, and it seemed to be one of the reasons Mullen got fired, he really talked about organization, structure, kind of having a structured program from top to bottom. Allegedly, and I think I heard this from Bud Elliott on his podcast and various other places, Cover 3 podcast, I believe. He said Napier kind of went into these jobs last year, went into Auburn and basically said, this is what kind of organizational structure I need to succeed. If you don't give this to me, I'm not going to we're not going to really have a conversation here. And I guess they kind of balked on giving that to him. It would seem to be what Florida wants. They want somebody to come in that's very detailed. Scott Strickland mentioned details today, detail-oriented, building something for sustained success. He mentioned sustained success a lot. Not just kind of because they've had each of the last 3 coaches had kind of a flash of success, and then it's followed up with a lot of losing. So I think that would seem to kind of point in his direction. Those kind of things. I just read a piece on him that talked about he's so detailed. He's asking why don't we list heights by quarter inches to kind of help our players look a little better, like that amount of detail. Like he's. Wow. Yeah, and the same article, somebody said, what's the difference between him and Saban? And the coach they asked that to said, well, one coach is offense, one coach is defense. So he's kind of got that eye for organizational structure. If all that is true, I think that he would definitely be a guy that's going to rise up the list. But
for sure, yeah,
he may also have some other opportunities. It seems like.
It is a good time to be an agent for coaches. Jimmy Sexton going to buy a new yacht.
That guy, you want to talk about being on the right side of everything. He gets paid when they get fired. He gets paid when they get hired.
He gets the consulting fee sometimes from the school to get the new guy. I mean, it's crazy.
This is another name that I like. His name started. He's a guy that I kind of had my eye on for a while, and he's starting to pop up, I think, in a lot more jobs now. And I think he's the guy you like as well.
Yeah.
Dave Miranda, I think what he's done, he was one of the best defense coordinators in college football at LSU, was a good recruiter at LSU as well, was the primary recruiter on some of those 5-star guys they went out and signed, and then has shown at Baylor that he can be the head man, make some adjustments from his first year where they struggled a little bit, and now they're playing really well. What do you like about Aranda?
This is my national coach of the year this year. If I had a ballot, I'm voting Matt Araiza second in the Heisman ballot, and I'm voting Dave Aranda coach of the year. The thing with Aranda that I really like is look what happened after he left. You know what I mean? Like that LSU defense after he left fell off a cliff. The organization fell off a cliff, and you can really, and I think that's as telling almost as much as what he's done since he got to a program that was mired in scandal. That's putting it lightly when he got there. Yes. And he's been able to turn, and look how that team plays. That what they did to Oklahoma, they had Oklahoma all twisted around so badly, they benched Caleb Williams, who was a Heisman candidate. That is scheme, that is talent. And my favorite moment of the year was him taking the timeout and kicking the field goal, because that shows the level of preparation that he's putting into. He's thinking, okay, well, if we win by more than 10, and now it's going to matter because if Oklahoma State,
tiebreaker,
bingo. So now you got that tiebreaker. And so if Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma this week, there's going to be a 3-way tie at the top. And no matter what, because of that field goal, Baylor will play for the Big 12 championship. So like, the fact that he's thinking on those levels ahead of time, the level of preparation, and everybody talks about what a cerebral guy he is. You can see it in the recruiting. This guy, I mean, if I'm any school in America, this is my first choice. And no offense to the fine people of Waco, Texas, but you're halfway between nowhere and nothing. You got Houston on one side, Dallas on the other. You're in the middle, and then you're 90 miles from anything. Again, like, not that Gainesville's a sprawling metropolis, but it's probably a little better place to live day to day.
Listen, my wife would love to live in Waco, Texas, with all the
house hunter programs.
Yeah.
Can you tell we both have significant others who have subjected us to this television before?
Chip and Joanna, baby. That's a selling point in this household. So, I think he would be. I think he would do well wherever, and he seems to be a guy that's now leapt to the top of kind of media, for the media kind of choices for LSU and USC now too. So I think he would do well. Obviously, he's got the SEC experience, can really coach defense. He's shown a willingness to have not just kind of a ball controlled defensive coach style offense. They play some pretty good offense there. Went out and hired BYU's offensive coordinator after the season. So he's shown the ability to adapt after his first year. So I think he would be an interesting prospect. Collin.
The other thing I was going to say about Miranda is that the knock would be he's not the most, like, even though he's a hell of a recruiter, is not like the most outgoing social, CEO type, which is why Florida might even be the best fit. Because if you're taking a job like LSU, USC, shaking hands, kissing babies, maybe that's not as much his strength. Well, if you want a major job, you're going to have to do some of it no matter where you go, of course. But maybe you have to do less of that in Gainesville than you would somewhere else.
Yeah, Florida fans convinced themselves they liked Jim McElwain when he was winning games. So, I think the number one thing at Florida is if you win, you'll do all right.
Yeah, for sure.
It's Mullen. I've earlier this year I kind of said this about the way the team played, but really Mullen, it's that major league too, where when he does this shimmy, the women in Cleveland go crazy, and then when he gets straight to the White Sox, when he does this shimmy, it makes the women in Cleveland puke. It's the same thing.
It's so true.
That's really how they
Chip Kelly was a genius at Oregon until he decided to leave, and then now all of a sudden he was the most antisocial jerk anybody had ever met. So I mean, it's true to some extent for sure.
Collin, could I interest you in a lightly used Bob Stoops?
No,
because that is a name I've actually heard that has been reached out to.
No.
That's a name I've heard has been reached out to. I don't think it would be the most inspired hire. Could it work? I think it could work. I don't know. Could it just kind of be? Would it necessarily take you to that next level? I don't know about that.
Can we talk about the member of the Tampa Bay media who put out there that Bob Stoops was in the air to get hired at Florida State? Said he was in Tallahassee on a plane and had landed. I believe he had said he was either on a plane to Tallahassee or had landed in Tallahassee to take the FSU job. That was one of the crazier, and then just deleted all of it and didn't even acknowledge that it happened. One of the funnier moments. It never happened. Yeah. Somebody can remind me in the chat who that media member was. So I'm going to say that Bob is not afraid to have an agent out there floating a little bit.
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah,
think
I got some floats on Deion Sanders to USF this year that would blow your mind. So agents get out there in the streets, they start floating stuff. Look, Stoops, he's not bad on TV. But asking a guy at his age to come in, recruit Florida, and I know he has tons of Florida ties. I understand that, and he probably has relationships even with high school coaches in the area. There's some upside there, but that is.
I think that's a retread. That's a bigger risk than hiring Napier, in my opinion. The risk 100%. That he is 100% motivated to come back into it. He came back and coached. I think when he coached was he in the XFL?
Yes. Yeah, he did.
And I think one of the things was it's not as time consuming as a college job. That's kind of one of his selling points. So this is just a name I've heard, so I threw it up here. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm not sure that'd be the best. Interesting name from the chat here, Venables. I think that would be an really interesting hire. The one thing with him is it does not seem like I believe he's had opportunities. He's making
all the opportunities.
He's making $2.5 million at Clemson now as the D coordinator. He may just not want it, but if he did, I think he's a guy that recruits really well. He's kind of like Miranda, but kind of even at another level almost in terms of sustained success. And I think even recruiting, he's kind of been more. He's kind of helped lead that machine. So that's definitely a name that if he wanted to jump in and throw his name in the hat, I would definitely want to listen. Some other names I've heard, the ones we've already gone over are kind of some of the big names that you're seeing out there and guys that I like that I think would do well. Somebody threw out Hugh Freeze. I don't know. If you're not hiring a Kiffin for stuff, I don't think you're hiring Freeze. He's a really good recruiter, but I don't know if that's linked to prostitution and other things. So I don't know how great of a recruiter he is.
Well, to be fair, he does recruit Florida because he was in Florida when he got popped for the prostitution. He was in the Panhandle when he got popped with a university cell phone trying to hire a hooker. I
think if you're shy away from Kiffin, you may shy away from Freeze.
The thing with Freeze, though, is that what he's done with Malik Willis is like, wow. I mean, that guy can play, and so he got him to Liberty. He got that guy to Lynchburg, Virginia, to be chased and take religion classes. Like, I mean, that's
and on the other side of it, they just got popped this weekend by Billy Napier, Louisiana.
That's right. They played that weird game. I couldn't figure out why that game was getting played.
He's a guy that I think would be an interesting name, but he would not be in my top. Whatever.
If I'm him, I think you take the next step for Freeze if he's going to get back on. Remember, he was at Ole Miss, which was not a premier job when he got there. I think he takes his next step is like a lower tier Power 5 school.
Yeah.
But if you're UF, you can do better. You should do better. Why are you going to roll the dice at this point? You can afford to roll the dice. You need to make as safe a hire as possible. I mean, does Freeze have a high ceiling? Sure, but his floor is low and significant. I think you can do better.
If you want to talk about high floor, I don't have his stuff up here, but a name I saw thrown out today is not Bob Stoops, but Mark Stoops at Kentucky. That's the high floor candidate, I think.
That is a very high floor. You're going to win 10 games a year. Are you going to get to?
One thing they've done is they have a 5-star offensive tackle committed, I think, right now at Kentucky. Mm-hmm. He's recruited well. One thing they've done really well is they identify players early. And Mac Jones initially committed to Kentucky. What happened? Alabama offered him. He left Kentucky. I don't think he's a pick that would get anybody very excited. But if you are looking for a high floor, if you strike out a little bit and you're looking for a high floor, he's definitely a high floor candidate. Defensive coordinator at Florida State, successful in recruiting there. He would be the high floor candidate, I think. But I don't know. I do have kind of a dark horse candidate that I think if I would be shocked if this happened. I don't think it will happen. I think he's more likely to come with somebody else. But if you want to talk about a guy that Florida had in the past, a coach that's recruited Miami, that's very well thought of, Brian Johnson, currently the quarterback's coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Collin, you're an Eagles fan, so
I am.
This would hurt you, maybe. And who wouldn't want their coach to be on the cover of an NCAA football game? How's that for a recruiting pitch?
What? When was this?
He was the quarterback at Utah that beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. I believe NCAA 2009.
Was that the Urban Meyer? It was the Urban Meyer year, right?
No. After Florida beats Alabama in the SEC championship game, Utah beats Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. He was the quarterback. Yeah. He was on the cover of NCAA football the following season.
Wow!
Talk about a recruiting pitch.
Sure.
But he's a guy that was the quarterback's coach at Florida. Called plays last year. Was basically the offensive coordinator for that Kyle Pitts, Kyle Trask, Kadarius Toney team that lit up the scoreboard and they're one of the best offenses in Florida history. He recruited Miami for Florida, so he was probably one of the better recruiters on staff if you're putting him down there. Young guy, really highly thought of, obviously get hired away for an NFL job. I think you could do worse. He would be way down my list, but I thought it was an interesting name to bring up, which just to think about.
So for as an Eagles fan, I can tell you that watching Nick Sirianni coach every week, despite what happened today, watching Nick Sirianni coach every day, I'd want to leave if I was Brian Johnson. I'd put my name out there for a few jobs, and especially because like the Eagles have to take a quarterback in the next draft. The rumor is now possibly go acquire Russell Wilson, so we'll see. But if I'm him, yeah, it's a great fit. But I think if you're UF, you got to hire somebody with head coach experience.
I think so too.
This is too big a job. It's too big a job. And, there's a difference between being the guy on the sideline and the guy who's the face of the program. There just is. And having seen that before, I think would be almost a requirement.
Who are some other guys is there anybody else that comes to mind that you think this would be an interesting spot for? I agree with you that I think it seems to be after kind of what happened with Will Muschamp that they're really intent on hiring, even though it wasn't the same administration. They're more intent on hiring a guy with some proven head coaching track record. Does anybody else kind of pop to mind for you that could be interesting for this job?
I mean, let's look down the top. The best way to often do this, is to look down like the top 25. I'll throw a name out at you. He had a terrible season this year. But what Tom Allen did at Indiana last year was miraculous, and he can recruit Florida. We know he can recruit Florida.
I don't think he would get very many people excited.
He wouldn't get people excited, but man, you want to win. You want to build a culture that people like embrace. He took that program from nothing, and maybe he wouldn't even want to leave because he's an Indiana-born kid. But man, he recruited Florida like crazy. If you want to go, they're 2-9 this year. I get it, but like, if you're going to take a reach on a guy,
that was last year, I think he would have had a good shot.
Yeah, and they just had injury problems. They're on their third quarterback right now, and they just, and it's so hard to sustain there because it's so hard to sustain recruiting. Yeah. But you ask those players, anyone who's coached with him, played with him, he did a year at USF as the D coordinator. I mean, you talk to anybody about that guy, and they just, you'll hear things about him like just fawning praise. That's not ever what you ever heard about Dan Mullen, and especially not what you ever heard about Will Muschamp. So like, just throwing it out there. If you get on the top 25 right now, so let's go AP top 25. Who could you get?
I'm also, while you're looking at that, I'm contractually obligated to mention Kerwin Bell. I think he would do well wherever he is.
I think he'd be great, but he's got to be a coordinator. He's never been. He's been a head coach at the D2 level.
They are
D2 coach. D2 national champion coach.
That's right. Kerwin Bell, Cade Bell, bring them both home.
I agree.
I actually think they would do very well. That's probably not going to happen. They are at Western Carolina, improved the team from 1 win to 4 wins this year, won 4 out of their last 5. So went from averaging like 17 points a game to like, I'd say mid-30s or upper 30s. So he's doing very well there. He's a guy that I'd always hope would get a chance at Florida. I don't know if it's going to happen, but
maybe as a coordinator, possibly as a quarterback's coach. Yeah, I did a great interview with him when he was a couple years ago.
Yeah,
really sharp guy, really engaging, smart, funny, gets not just the media, gets the players, gets the whole college football thing. It didn't work out for him as a coordinator at the D1 level, but that was certainly, I think, not.
And I think his son Cade is a name to watch for, not for this vacancy, not for right now, but a guy that will make his way up through the coaching circle. So Florida Gators fans, if you're listening to this, check out Western Carolina football. Kerwin Bell's head coach. Cade, his son, is their offensive coordinator. They are doing really good things there, and you'll probably hear a lot from Cade in the future.
Go Catamounts.
Right, that's right. Who you got in the top 25? Any names pop out that interest you?
How about Dave Doran?
As we kind of get through.
How about Dave Doran?
I don't think that would excite anyone.
Might not excite people, but you're going to win.
I mean, they have not. Here's the thing: they have not taken that next step at North Carolina State. What's to say he would be able to take that next step at Florida in the SEC, playing Georgia?
North Carolina State, you're the 3rd or 4th most popular team in your own state on any single given day. There's not a lot of recruiting base there. No. Matt Brown comes in at age 146 and just like starts pulling 5 stars out of the air because he has the resources of the Tar Heels behind him. That's a tough one. How about Dave Clawson? Speaking of ACC coaches that have had success and have outdone themselves so far.
Again, I think Florida views themselves at a certain level. I mean, I think maybe those guys would be successful, but I just don't think that the fan base would get really excited about either one. And I don't know if either one showed the recruiting prowess required at this position, because I think that is a big part of what they're going after. When they mention organization, I think part of it is recruiting structure, that whole other personnel side of which I don't think either of those guys have ever had to deal with in terms of creating that large of an organization, because they haven't had like the budgets to do that. So
I'm gonna give you two guys that maybe two outside of Miranda. I think two of my guys that I think if I had to pick any coach in America, and I was trying to build a program, Lance Leipold. I know he's only been in Kansas for 1 year, but that you saw what that guy did at Buffalo and how they fell off a cliff after he left. But the creativity that he showed on offense, the fact that he kept that team in games this year, playing games this year. I mean, they just pulled off the biggest miracle in the history of Kansas football.
I would love to see him and Creighton is the other guy. Guys that started at the lower levels and won a ton of games at the D3 levels and that have shown they can coach at the D1 level. I'd love to see them get a big job. I just don't think it's going to be Florida. But those guys are interesting because, football's football. It's not too different at each level. The athletes are a little bit better, but that's
you're just getting better. If he's able to structure a department where he can go out and hire what I call the Trooper Taylor position, like go hire the guy to go get the guy. Yeah. You hire a bunch of Trooper Taylors. You say go get them, and then bring them in here, and I'll coach them up.
Yeah.
If he could put together some kind of structure like that, that would be the guy. And the next guy who is also on that same list is Jamie Chadwell, because you talk about creativity on offense.
I think he would be a guy that I think Florida fans would respond more to him than a guy like Doran or Clausen, even though he does not have the same track record at the Power 5 level. I think the offense, the kind of personality, that kind of stuff would be interesting. And I do think that I think Florida definitely wants a guy that's coached in the South or is from the South. That's what I thought when they were looking for a D coordinator. Kirby Smart is a Southern guy. He goes into these high schools in Georgia and Florida. He can talk to these coaches and their parents on a very similar level that I don't think Dan Mullen ever could.
Right.
Dan Mullen referenced himself as a Yankee several times at Mississippi State. It's definitely a culture difference in Mississippi and in Georgia and Florida, right? So I think they're looking for a guy. Let's wrap up here. Give me your top three. If you're Florida, who are your top three guys?
Miranda's my number one. Mario. If you can get Mario, he'll win. I mean, he'll win. He'll definitely get players. There's some game management stuff with Mario where, like, if you're a betting fan, like there's some opportunities in the wagering community. Let's say second halves, especially with when Mario's coaching. But he'll get players in, and you get better players, you're gonna win most of the time. And oh boy, who's my third? I guess it's Napier. I mean, and that's not a bad hire, but you're basically, I think the floor is higher with Miranda and the floor is higher with Mario. So I think I would start there. But Dave Miranda's I think he's so far and away the coach of the year this year in college football. Like, it's not close.
You want to talk about detail oriented, him being able to spit out that Big 12 tiebreaker right at the end of the game in the heat of the moment.
I mean, that's just like
detail oriented.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, and that's and analytically driven, can recruit. Give me that as a college football fan, and I'll figure out the rest later. You know what I mean? That's what I want. I want somebody smart, thoughtful, deal with the other crap later. But if you can recruit and you can do math, come on, let's go.
That's why I'm kind of in a similar camp. In no particular order. I like Cristobal. I like Miranda. Kiffin, I don't know if that'll get past administration for whatever reason. I like him too. And then I think Napier, from everything you read about Napier, everything you hear about him, he's a guy that seems to be primed for this moment, primed for the next big job, and seems to be a guy that wants this job. And if you're looking for organizational structure, he's a guy that kind of preaches that all the time and is all big on organizational structure. So
Nick Saban went from that
big.
Kent State to the Browns, right? And then he went to Michigan State. Isn't that how it worked? Kent State to
then LSU, then the Dolphins, then Bama.
Right. So, like, I mean,
and he got fired from the Browns.
Yeah, working for Schottenheimer. I mean, not his fault.
So you kind of you see that kind of it is something interesting to see a guy work his way back up because you usually only get one shot. If you're getting multiple shots, you're probably pretty talented. Lane Kiffin.
Kiffin's got 3.
Falls in the same boat.
Kiffin's done it 3 times now. Oakland, USC, and now where he's at. To rise 3 times like that and be like my age, that's incredible. Yeah.
Well, Collin, thanks for coming on to talk about Florida with us.
Absolutely, buddy.
I think we're probably going to do another live stream on a different area talking about USF's made some coaching changes. So
Los Toros.
This one, USF. Talked about this one. We're talking about that one next. So,
that one.
Collin, thanks for jumping on. Everybody that watched, thanks for watching. We'll probably do some more stuff like this when the hire is made, and then we'll probably start to put out some type of scheme type videos when the coaching hire is made to kind of see what they like to do, how it fits Florida's personnel, and all that kind of stuff. But Collin, thanks for jumping on. We're going to get out of here.
See you shortly, buddy.